Thank you. That was an amazing introduction. Our moderator is killing it. My name is Sarah Mollette, and I want to go on record with the recording before I forget that this beautiful presentation you are viewing, while it was a group effort as far as the content, everything you're seeing on your screen is done by Kacy, my amazing co-presenter. I am an associate professor and the research and online learning librarian at Marshall University, which is in Huntington, West Virginia, right on the Ohio River. And I'm going to turn it over to Kacy to take away the rest of our introductions.
So I'm Kacy Lovelace, and thank you, Sarah. I'm an associate professor, research and student success librarian at Marshall University as well. And this is a picture of Drinko Library. That is our home here in Huntington, West Virginia. And we are both members of the Research and Instruction Services Department. Sarah and I both do instruction sessions. We do research consultations, outreach, resource creation. We're library partners to multiple colleges. We staff the research desk. We both teach full semester undergraduate courses. We're currently creating graduate courses for our new School of Library Science. And we're both innovation catalysts at Marshall, part of the pilot group of design thinkers embedded in colleges across campus. Additionally, I co-chair the Voter Friendly Campus Initiative at Marshall and the Drinko Display Committee and hold art exhibitions in the library. And Sarah's part of the University AI Task Force and so many other committees and projects. And on top of all of this, Sarah coordinates the library instruction requests and I schedule the research desk. So we're pretty tired a lot of the time. We have pretty full plates. We also have a lot of knowledge about the research and instruction needs on campus because we're providing the instruction and research help, and we're also coordinating and administrating these services as well. So our awareness of the research and instruction needs on our campus are both practical and administrative.
So part of our proposal for the session was to really explain why we created this micro-credential. So you'll see a couple of reasons on the screen. So we have seen a reduction in our research and instruction services department faculty for various reasons. We've had some people move to new jobs. We've had some folks move into other positions. And however, our enrollment on campus is actually increasing. We're very blessed to have a somewhat new university president who is really taking his role seriously. So our numbers are going up as our research and instruction services department faculty numbers are going down. So another reason was we wanted to supplement our information literacy offerings for our faculty who don't have class time to spare for us. I know that other universities are probably dealing with that problem where faculty really do understand our value, but it's so difficult if you go, say, from a 16-week semester to a 14 or 15-week semester, which Marshall has done, or if you're suddenly implementing a 2-day fall break, which Marshall did kind of suddenly, or, you have a lot of weather delays and cancellations over the last few years. So faculty were sending their students to meet with us for research consultations and in fact requiring that for a grade without running it by us or in any way coordinating any kind of schedule. So that was another bullet point. I am the online learning librarian and Kacy does a lot of digital instruction as well. And we wanted to explore the possibilities of virtual self-paced certification modules for delivering research instruction just to kind of have it if you like what we did in your class, but you, again, don't want to give us that time, instead of sending each individual student to us by a certain date, how about you have them do this on their own time? And then the micro-credential sort of buzzword has been floating around Marshall actually for a long time. Kacy was on sort of the inaugural exploratory committee, and then it went a little quiet, and then it sort of came back with our current president. So we wanted to make sure as librarians we are staying innovative, we are on top of those emerging trends, not just in our profession in general, but also in higher education and at our institutions. And I did ask Kacy, do we want that dumpster fire dog on this slide? slide because I feel like that's the one that she and I are constantly sending back and forth on a chaotic day. So that is why we created this micro-credential. So I'll hand it back over to Kacy for the next section.
So designing our microcredential. So creating a microcredential requires multiple platforms at MU and the experts who administer those platforms. So much of our process was kind of figuring out what we needed to know as we created the content and the assessments. So choosing the topics for our content, that wasn't particularly difficult. We relied on our experiences with library instruction. Our main job here was to make it as general as possible, so it was valuable to all students, but primarily first-year students, the demographic who we see the largest number of in our instruction sessions. So first, creating a microcredential, we needed to learn how to use Microsoft Skills Exchange. Microsoft Skills Exchange, it's housed on the Genius platform, but this is basically our university microcredentialing platform. So that's online learning. We're lucky that we have a really great relationship with online learning. In fact, their offices are just down the hall from both of our offices. And in fact, we used to be one entity, the library is an online learning, before splitting just a few years ago. So we needed that. And then Blackboard, that's also online learning. We needed a course development shell, and we also needed a lot of guidance. There were changes that were happening as we switched to Blackboard Ultra. So that was starting to be rolled out, and there were new sort of features that we weren't familiar with. And also we weren't really familiar with sort of the integration between Blackboard and the Marshall Skills Exchange. And then H5P, so you might see it listed as interactive content, H5P. This is actually in Blackboard, and this is for interactivity, quizzes, drag and drop, and a whole lot of other tools I'm going to show you right now. So this is the current offerings from H5P. If you have not had the opportunity to use it, they update it regularly. There are tons of different tools and assessments and sort of charts and things like that you can make. I'm still kind of figuring out how I would use a lot of these, but I think it kind of speaks to how this tool can be used across academic levels. So there's a lot of tools that I think will be really appropriate for K through 12 students. And I had used H5P before in Pressbooks, and the ability to drop those interactive elements into an OER textbook and have it sync with your LMS is pretty invaluable. It's also kind of different using it in Blackboard versus using it in a tool like Pressbooks that has native integration. It was a lot more seamless, I think, with Pressbooks. So there was kind of a learning curve there as well. So all of these different things, drag and drop, drag the word, emoji clouds, fill in the blank, game maps is one you can kind of see peeking out there is one of my favorites. So for this one, I designed the assessments and Sarah designed the instructional content, and I used question sets, sort the paragraphs, mark the words, image hotspots, drag the words, and multiple choice as the tools that I used from H5P. Interactive book and game map, I think, looks so cool in the Chase. If you have a really competitive class, so again, thinking kind of towards like middle schoolers, I think that this could, be really great for other academic levels as well. So memory games. So the Chase is the one I was talking about that, sort of you can create live competitions with this one. They're not exactly the same. They don't function exactly the same, but you'll find most of these tools, most likely all of these tools in any format that you sort of find them in, Blackboard or Pressbooks. It's also available for other learning management systems. So it integrates with Canvas and Moodle and things like that. And it also integrates with apps like Canva as well. So as we were going through this process, we definitely ran into some issues, which Sarah will talk a little bit more about the integration in her next section. But coordination with online learning was absolutely essential to get this thing off the ground at every step of the way. So this is how H5P looks in the Blackboard course that houses our microcredential. So this top image here is a drag the words. So you just have students drag this to the appropriate blank. And on the bottom, you'll see a multiple choice question. This one is one that I really like. If you have, so for this, we used our If I Apply, our in-house source evaluation tool here that we designed at Marshall. For this one, you're just moving the paragraphs kind of up and down until you have them in the right order. So sort the paragraphs. For this one, this is the one that I think was the trickiest. Mark the words. So for this, I took 2 abstracts from kind of similar papers that had overlapping topics and content, and you actually have to go through and mark each word where, you know, these 2 sources kind of overlap. So the next one is image hotspots. So the top one is an ALA citation with its image hotspots. And if you click on one of these, this bottom screen is what you get. It kind of has a little slide over, and it gives you the information that you clicked on. So I clicked on author, and it tells me about how to set up the author in an APA citation. And I think this is the only image that I actually got this in. You'll see over here, it's kind of cut off, but it says, I am confused. So at any point during any of these H5P activities, a student can click on, or a user can click on, I am confused, and it'll take them to a little form where they can ask questions or let us know that there are issues or, you know, sort of trouble spots that we maybe weren't aware of. The one above, the mark the words, I think was probably the most I'm confused messages that I got. So I had to retool this one several times to make it, you know, sort of more user-friendly. And then it's also worth noting with our assessments that these assessments were kind of assessments that happened through each module of the content, and then there was a final exam. So they had to score a certain percentage on the initial sort of activities as they went along, but we didn't really grade those or count those. They just had to kind of get like 80% to move on to the next module. The only thing that we really graded for the microcredential or for them to get their certificate was the final exam. So here are 2 examples from the final exam. These are both question sets. And then here are 2 others, question sets and drag the words. And these are actually within the same, I believe these are both in question sets. So you can even do like a drag the words within an assessment that has true and false or multiple choice questions. So I'll hand this back to Sarah.
Thank you, Kacy. So Kacy was a rock star integrating all of those multimedia elements into our microcredential. I took the lazy route and I mostly just cribbed content from our LibGuides. I know that if you subscribe to LibApps at your institution, that you often have very strong feelings for or against the LibGuides. I love them, but only because I've been using them a long time and I have taken the time to learn how to make them look better than I originally thought they could look. So because of that, we had a lot of existing content. So that definitely made my job easier as far as creating the sections. So one of the first sort of problems that I encountered was if you're not familiar with Blackboard, and this might be true for other learning management systems, then you can of course link to existing web content, or you can use the LTI, which I should have looked up to tell you what that stands for. But it's some sort of authenticator that instead of linking to an external web page and opening that up in a new tab, it will allow you to open that web page within your LMS shell. So the students don't have a new tab to keep track of. They don't have to like figure out, you know, situationally where am I? You know, I was just looking at this interface, now I'm looking at this one. So that was through LTI authentication. Because we had some issues with that, I ended up just linking to the pages, which is what I just said I would rather not do. But that is something for you to consider based on your LMS if LTI is an option to work with an IT person or our in-house library website person to try to figure out if we could make that just be a more smoother look for the students. So on the screen, you'll see a screenshot of one of the LibGuides that we use, which was our Research 101. That was where I got some a lot of the like sectional content for our microcredential. So another learning curve was working within Blackboard, and this might sound very obvious to our more seasoned instructors, but it took me an embarrassingly long time to understand that I was working in a development shell that our online learning guru, Hillary, had created for me. And I was putting all of my content in there and I was editing that content. I did not realize that there was a live shell that would be what was used in the microcredential that Hillary had copied over and published. So I was making changes in the development shell and they were not being conveyed in the live shell just because I didn't understand the differences and I didn't understand that I needed to ask about the differences. So I would definitely recommend, if you like the idea of creating a micro-credential within your learning management system, to really take the time to work with your design center or online learning team to get some of those more basic skills polished so that you're not doing them as you work. All right, Kacy, I'm going to have you scroll a little farther down. Thank you. Oh, this is, I'm handing it over to you, I believe. Let me make sure I said everything I wanted to, and I did. So I'm handing it back to Kacy now.
All right, so lessons learned from creating the microcredential. So clear user instructions are vital, and that may seem obvious, but essentially they're also useless if users are not reading those instructions. But the problem seemed to decrease over time. We would get questions that seemed kind of obvious, at least to us. But we had also spent so long working, with this microcredential and with these tools that, of course, they seemed obvious at that point. So we also designed the microcredential to be self-sustaining, so no manual grading or tracking. We were so busy with so many other things that we wanted to make sure that we weren't having to stop and grade and issue certificates to students, things like that. Sarah had mentioned that I had been on a microcredential committee previously, and we had talked many times about getting a microcredential off the ground. And at one point we had talked about using like the framework for information literacy to design an information literacy microcredential. But I think we would have to grade at each step of the process. It would be so hard to use things like multiple choice questions to kind of prove those different dispositions and things. And so we kept it simple. We wanted to make sure that we weren't constantly going back and doing work or forgetting anyone. And I kind of skipped juggling multiple platforms, both a blessing and a curse. Sarah covered a lot of that with LTI integration. It was definitely helpful that we had online learning that was kind of administering those programs for us. But of course, they couldn't do everything for us. We had to do a lot of that Blackboard work ourselves. And that's maybe where some of the curse kind of came into that. So aside from it being self-sustaining, there were still growing pains. We still had those I'm confused reports that we would get, or we had some issues with students that couldn't figure out how to print their certificates or generate their certificates. But for the most part, it's been pretty smooth sailing. And that brings me to popularity surprised us. So because it was so self-sustaining, we would kind of get bogged down in everything else that we were doing and we would forget about it. And then when one of us would go check it and we'd be like, wow, there's 50 people that have taken it, or wow, 100 people have taken it. And that was surprising to us because we didn't really market it right away. We did very light marketing, especially at first. And that was our RIS faculty newsletter was next, which I believe we added that finally this spring. And then word of mouth and some faculty champions. So during the fall, Sarah had mentioned that we had classes where we didn't know that we were going to be doing research consultations for all of these different students. For example, the Communications 103 course, our freshman communications class, there were 28 sections of that class, and each student had to meet with a research librarian for each assigned speech. And I can't remember if there were 2 or 3. I think maybe it was 3. So we quickly, I think in late January or in late September last fall, we're like, oh, wow, we don't have enough people to actually handle all of these and do instruction and staff the desk. Like, it was becoming really hard to schedule anything. And so we were a team of 5 faculty librarians and 2 graduate assistants. We're now 6 faculty librarians. But we quickly found ourselves just unable to teach or really do anything else but research consultations, which we all love to do. But this really took a lot of the burden off of us, because we were able to let those communications faculty members know that if students needed extra help, they could turn to something like this, like the microcredential. And you can see a kind of tiny picture of let me see if I can make that bigger. No, I don't think I can. This is what it looks like in our partners newsletter the first time we kind of marketed it. All right, handing it back to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Kacy. And I do want to go back, because I don't think Kacy or I were going to mention this because I hadn't thought about it, but when she was talking about, we got some of those I am confused reports, or many, where's my certificate report? Because for the students who were assigned the micro-credential for a grade instead of the appointment, they had to prove to their professor they completed it with that certificate. And originally, I think the design center said, oh, the certificate is emailed to them automatically. There's a little bit of a lag time, but we didn't really see that as being problematic. But of course, students now, things are instant, right? So if they aren't immediately seeing that email in their inbox with that certificate so that they can upload proof of finishing this assignment, 5 minutes before the deadline, we were getting a lot of emails. So we went in and added very bold how to get your certificate. But that just really highlights the importance of evaluating what we're doing, gathering feedback, and continuously improving based on that feedback. We did have the benefit of our GAs completing the micro-credential for us before we fully kind of put it out there. And that was nice from a student perspective. Like Kacy mentioned earlier, we were in it for like 2 straight months and didn't want to look at it again for any reason whatsoever. So having those fresh eyes tell us like, oh, I wasn't sure about this, I didn't know how to do that, it was really helpful. Okay, so our current state then, next steps, you can see, and Kacy did mention a little bit that we were surprised. So when we did launch it in the fall at a very soft launch, it was 163 enrollments. So between August, well, I'll say between September and December, I think we were still polishing it during August. So 163 enrollments, which again, I forgot about it because then the chaos of the semester began. And just, I didn't want to think about it anymore, frankly. And Kacy, I think, mentioned in a department meeting, oh, let me go look and see what our enrollment numbers are. And we both fell out of our chairs when we saw that. And so then in this past spring, for that to have increased what I would consider dramatically to 504 more enrollments, we were just very pleasantly surprised by that. And a lot of it is because of those very large sections of things like FYS and public speaking, and then English 101 as well. Let's see. Yes, so result of a handful of very large classes requiring that for a grade. So our next steps then, we knew from the beginning that we were creating that beginner level with the intent of then creating the intermediate and the advanced and the expert level. So for beginner level, we were obviously thinking, like Kacy mentioned, incoming freshmen, but also any student who really has not been introduced to our library's resources and services as far as the research process goes. So that could be a non-traditional student who has not been on a university campus for 20 years. So for the intermediate level, our hope is to do one for juniors and seniors, essentially not nearly as much content, but much more complex search strategies and really highlighting critical thinking skills that goes into looking for those advanced scholarly resources. For our advanced level, that will be geared towards grad students, especially if they're working on a thesis or dissertation. And then our advanced level will be for faculty working on published research. So when we started this last year, we did think, okay, one level per summer is probably the maximum capacity for our personal bandwidth. That said, we haven't started the intermediate level as we are mid-June in our summer this year. But again, luckily, I think we can pull from a lot of the existing content that we have on our LibGuide. So on the screen now, on the leftmost side, you will see what is essentially the home dashboard for this microcredential. So you can see how it's organized. We have a Start Here folder. So in that, we give them a very, very short overview video on what to expect, as well as how to contact us. And then our first folder is college level research for beginners. And then those subfolders, the first one is choosing and narrowing your topic. So in the middle part of what you see on your screen, that was the existing LibGuide that we then linked to with interactive content such as text, yes, but also expandable boxes, self-checks, and videos. So what you're seeing here is linked to a web page. If you can imagine where the green side menu is, if we had used the LTI authenticator, the green tabs would not be showing, only the black menu there for this specific page. So that is one of the differences for that LTI. And then on the far right, this is, again, just one of the linked LibGuide content pages. I used Canva to create this infographic on the steps for choosing and narrowing a research topic. So that's kind of an idea of this is where they would start in Blackboard. This is where they would sort of learn about this concept. And for each of the concepts, I then tried to have a visual example or two. So that is what you see on your screen there. Kacy and I have recently taken our design centers training. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Quality Matters, but it is online instructional certification to make sure that you are meeting accessibility needs, student engagement needs, really anything that an online educator needs to know. And that was fabulous. It's home. It stands for like humanistic something engagement something. Kacy's probably looking it up right now. I can't remember, but it's Marshall created and trademarked, but it really gave us additional insight that neither of us had, so that when we do move forward for the intermediate, expert, and advanced levels, we will be even better at what we create with our finished products. Kacy, I can't remember if you scroll, if I have any more talking points or if I'm handing it back to you.
Sorry, I didn't know I could have zoomed into that. Let's see. Oh, nope, that's it.
Oh, okay. So we we're very good on our time then, Kacy. She and I were both worried about that. So we have more than enough time for questions. So we would love to hear from you, whether you put those in the chat or if you would like to raise hand and unmute. And then, oops, let's see. All right. Do you have an estimate for the total number of hours that you spent? In my head, it was 1 million, but I don't think that's what it was. Time to budget per week. Gosh, I think I blocked it all out because it was a lot of work, and there were a lot of learning curves like Kacy mentioned, and just some like really basic barriers that we had to get through since this was our first time. I probably spent a couple of hours every day for like a month.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
And I know that probably sounds like a lot, but it was really my personal process was, Kacy and I sat down, what do we want this one to cover? What do those sort of section headings look like? Where do we think that information is that we can pull from? Finding that information, if we needed to adapt it or update it in any way, doing that, and then dropping it into the course, making sure that was working properly. The LTI issues honestly took up the most like back and forth communication because there are a lot of people involved in that part. So yeah, Kacy, what am I forgetting that you should add to that?
I would say you really had the tougher job, Sarah, having to actually format all of the content while I worked on the assessments. And I could kind of look at what you did and build the assessments pretty easily from all of your fabulous content. So I think you probably spent a little more time than I, but I mean, I still probably spent 2 hours every day for probably a month,
Yeah.
going through all of that. And I did look up home. So it is based on QM standards. It's just a lot simpler and a lot, it's very accessibility sort of focused, but it's humanistic online model for engagement.
Thank you, Kacy. And for the two of us working, Kacy and I work together on a lot of projects. So we have that benefit of knowing like our own and each other's kind of strengths and weaknesses. And we were able, I think, to really benefit from those like previous working experiences. But having someone fully in charge of like this folder of content and then having someone else in charge of the assessment, I think worked out really well because you're not like both working on the content folder and like, oh, is there overlap? Did I accidentally do something I didn't need to? So I would definitely recommend that process if it makes sense for the people who will be involved.
So we have a link to the LibGuide version of the microcredential. Did you not have one? So we didn't have a LibGuide version, but a lot of our content did come from our LibGuides. Sarah, would you care to share our modules that we created, like the one that you showed the screenshot of, like the searching for sources and things like that? And then while you're answering that, how long do you estimate it takes students to go through the sessions? That is a great question. I'm going to look really quickly and find the answer. Well,
that is a good question. We haven't looked. We did design it to be 90 minutes. I think we say in the introduction, this should take about an hour and a half. Of course, we specify that they can start and return at any time. So it is very much work at their own pace. Like it doesn't expire at any time once they hit start. The certification exam, they can take that. Kacy, did you mention that they can take that a few times? Like they don't only have to take it once. And I know that our GAs who completed it for us, they fell within, they did it a little quicker. Obviously, they were graduate students who were already working for the library, so they did it quicker than a freshman would. But we felt comfortable based on their feedback that saying generally about an hour and a half, we felt like that would be a fair time frame.
And as far as the amount of time students spent in the course itself, I don't think we have a very accurate picture of that because when I go to the analytics for it, it tells me that students spent anywhere from 0 to 9 hours in the course. So I think there's probably instances where students just kind of left their Blackboard up and maybe walked away from it because it probably didn't take that long, but students were able to leave it and come back to it and complete it in more than one session.
Yeah, so the micro-credential is through our LMS, so you would not be able to access that, like the full micro-credential. But I did drop a link into one of the LibGuides that we use, and from there you can view, you'll be on the Marshall Library page. Okay.
Students are using the micro-credential as a replacement to using the library resources overall. I don't think so, because the whole sort of point of this was to show students how to use the library. So I don't know for sure, but my instinct is that it would increase, their use of the library before it would lower it.
I agree. Anecdotally, we did not see a drop in our research consultations or our usage stats. I mean, aside from the drop of the 3 million consultations no longer being required. Like that was obviously a drop, thank God. But we have not noticed any drop in usage overall, yeah, I agree with Kacy. If anything, it's a stepping stone towards using it more. It'll build their confidence. They've seen screenshots. They're familiar with the website. They understand some of that jargon now. So I agree with that. And I do see the question there on maintenance. And again, aside from a little bit of the growing pains early on, we truly did build this so that there would be little to no maintenance. So the only thing that I have done with it was check enrollment numbers when our department team lead asked for those. Kacy, can you think of any maintaining?
No, but I did just check enrollment again, and it looks like we've had 45 students complete it this summer so far, which is pretty great since we don't have a whole lot of courses going on right now.
That's cool. I didn't know that. And then there's a question to repeat what we said about developing future micro-credentials. So I don't want to say anything that you don't need repeated. Was that about like the audience levels, Lorraine? And if you want to unmute or do like a thumbs up or chat.
Yeah. So I thought you might have said something about developing credentials for different audiences.
Yes.
And so I was curious about which audiences and whether if you're doing it for staff or faculty, would that carry like continuing education credits that they would use in their context?
That's a great question. We definitely want the intermediate level to still be focused on undergraduates like juniors and seniors, and then the advanced level for grad students, especially as they work through their theses and dissertations. For the advanced level, we're specifically going to focus on faculty who are doing research for promotion and tenure and publishing purposes. As far as outside of Marshall populations, that's certainly not been on my priority list. And I will go ahead and mention the Genius platform that we use that connects to Blackboard. Most of the academic and support departments on campuses who are creating micro-credentials are actually creating them for the community, and they are on a pay per credential basis. And depending on the content, the price varies quite a lot. We were told that we've been calling this a micro-credential because that's what we've been calling it. But it's technically, because it is free, they do not get their Genius badge. They only get that certificate, because otherwise we were going to have to charge our students $10. And we did not want to do that at all. So I will say that a lot of the micro-credentialing happening on campus is specifically for community members as a profitable venture through Marshall University. Thank you. These are such great questions.
And I guess we probably have time. I could pull up the Genius platform and kind of show you what we mean.
We have a good 10 minutes left until, we need to start to prepare for the new one. So yeah, take your time. Thank you.
So this is the Marshall Skills Exchange. Let's see. And this is the catalog of what's available. And you can usually tell by whether there's a price or not, who it's kind of geared towards. But there are some programs that are available for community members that are also available for campus community members. So for example, Design for Delight, Innovation Explorer, that's one that Sarah and I, probably one of our first experiences with the Marshall Skills Exchange. If you're a community member, you're paying $150. But if you're a student or faculty or staff, there's a link where you can take it and it's free. So it really does kind of depend on how it's set up.
And you can see the range. We have free, we have $10, we have $100, and we have $700. Lorraine?
Yeah, so I guess to continue the conversation, I'm just thinking about my setting where I'm in an academic medical institution. And so in some ways, we try to incentivize faculty and staff to attend different educational offerings by attaching CEs to them.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like this is something that would lend itself to that. Am I understanding that?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And if you are going the paid route, because I believe that even if it's a Marshall student, if one of the items, like say that one says $10, it might be still $10 to Marshall students, staff, and faculty, or it might be free. They always put like the coupon code. It goes through our authenticator.
I see.
But with the Genius platform, when you get that badge, that connects to your LinkedIn. And especially if you have professionals who are very good about updating their LinkedIn, that is going to be a big draw for them.
Interesting. Thank you so much.
And while it is the Genius platform, we still do work with Credly, and that is who actually provides our badges.
Thank you, Kacy. I knew I was forgetting one of those buzzwords. Okay, there is a question, and Kacy, this one might be for you, or it might be for our design center, and we would have to get back to you, but WCAG 2.1 compliant, which I think goes in effect next year. I don't remember, Callie, if that is true. But Kacy, H5P, I want to assume yes, because it is specific to like educators using this, but I would have to double check on that.
Yeah, I'm double checking because I don't know that answer offhand. It says H5P content aims for WCAG 2.1 level AA compliance, but not all content types or implementations are fully accessible.
And they probably flag those if they are somewhere on there. They probably specify. That's a great question, Callie.
Any others? And if you think of questions, I put the link for this presentation in the chat. And if you click on one of these buttons, you can email us directly.
Anybody have any other questions? We do have a few minutes if you can think of anything.
And since we do have a few minutes, I will pull up the microcredential and kind of just show you a few of the pages of it so you can see what it looks like. We'll turn on the student preview. Right.
And I will say, just while Kacy is on that main screen, one of the elements of our home process is to make things very streamlined. So we don't want students like scrolling forever. So what you see here, these sections, this is everything on that home page. And then they click into the folder to see the Start Here. So there are 2 items in the Start Here folder, Getting Started, What You Should Know, and then that short video. And then the next level is where all of the content lives. And then you have the final exam. And then what we added after getting so many questions was how to get the completion certificate. So that way you can see, okay, they only have, without expanding anything, those 4 items that they see upon entry. And that is to really help with cognitive load.
So I'll click on choosing and narrowing your topic. So there's going to be, so this links to the LibGuide that Sarah shared in the chat and that we had as part of the presentation. And of course, each of these expands. And there's self-checks. And then, of course, you can also see the different levels here, the intermediate. So it talks about previous research, capstone or career path. So it kind of advances with each step.
So yeah, all of those green menu items under beginner is what you would not see if your LTI was working properly.
Yeah.
And it would be opening within Blackboard. I know I keep saying that because I hate that we couldn't get it to work.
And then, of course, the infographic that Sarah showed. And here's another example of how to choose a narrow research topic. And then, of course, Sarah linked to our Ask a Librarian page, so they could ask us even directly through chat during business hours. And then here is the H5P. So this is the drag the phrases. which can be a starting point. So I think that's, whoop. No, I think, okay, there we go. So,
And we did have another question pop up in the chat.
I
perfect.
saw that and I was avoiding it because no, we have not considered sharing this Canvas course with other universities, and it's not Canvas. We use Blackboard, but I know there are a lot of similarities because that literally has not crossed my mind at all. I'm not entrepreneurial minded. And I don't honestly know what our institutional policy is regarding sharing content for other universities. I don't know what our policy is. Kacy, do you know?
I don't, but I would think that with the Genius platform, since we're sort of hosting community members via it, you would think that we would maybe be able to share it.
We probably could choose to create the community version for it. We just, because it's so Marshall specific for a lot of the screenshots for our library, we just never even considered that, to be honest. But thank you for that question. And we do, Kacy and I use Canva a lot. So some of those more visual graphics and videos and slideshows are from Canva. And then some of it's just HTML like you see there.
Here, I really appreciate that you put the link to Ask a Librarian everywhere, like on every module.
And, you know, someone asked earlier about, you know, library resources. So the fact that I put that in every module at the end, like, hey, if you have a question, click on here. Maybe I was just being smart without realizing it to help our stats.
And then here is that I am confused, send a question to the author. So on that particular question that they're confused by, or on a particular H5P sort of element, they can, you know, tell me exactly what their question was. And then this comes straight to my email. Have some great questions today.
I was going to say, I just saw one question and I know we have 1 minute left. So we have not noticed a difference in the types of questions or support needed from students following completion because we're not tracking it. So I would have to know if they are on chat. Our chat is anonymous. So if they had completed the microcredential, I would have their name. But if they asked us a chat question or if they dropped in at our desk, I would not have that name, nor would I have the time to cross-reference those. So we haven't noticed that, but we haven't been trying to notice it. But that's a really good question. Thank you, everybody. You've been a great group. These have been amazing questions. Definitely forcing Kacy and I to think about our microcredential again this summer as we avoid creating the next level. And thank you again to our amazing moderator.
Thank you so much.